the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Case Closed. Early shout out to Hakeem. Thank you very much for the super chat. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I believe. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. This is the place to be. And as usual, we got a all-star panel ready to get this going. Please like as you come in, share the stream, subscribe if you've not already. Now, the number of topics we have on the table today, all surrounding, shall we say, the idea of war, let's say. Okay, it is a Nord Stream pipeline. We have perhaps you have internal wars going on with regards to the debt limit and all that budget stuff that comes in, that pesky budgetary stuff, and the debt to GDP ratio that comes every once in a while and hunts us. And then we have the search wars, and all these things are of course related geopolitically through one means or the other. But let's start with the Nord Stream pipeline. That's NORD, ladies and gentlemen, the Nord Stream pipeline, and what's going on with that. So basic background on that pipeline is that basically it's a pipeline going from Russia to Germany. It is run by Gazprom, right? Gazprom, you guys probably heard of that company before when Vladimir Putin smoked somebody related with that company at some point, one of his killings, if you will, right? This is run by Gazprom. It's about 1,000 miles long. This thing got blown up September 2022, and everyone is blaming Russia in the media, that is, right? Blaming Russia for doing it, which doesn't seem to make sense because Russia could just turn off the line, right? They could turn off the spigot and say, hey, we're not sending the gas anymore. And also that pipeline gives them a lot of leverage. Why would they destroy this infrastructure in their time of, and they don't play that game of, hey, look what the US did. Now go put sanctions on the US. That's not going to work for them, right? That kind of soft power play is not going to work for them. So the first question here is just on the table before we get really into the weeds here, because Mr. Biden also threatened something about the pipeline before.
Can I comment on something on that?
Hold on one second, sir. You will restrain yourself. Anyways, Joe Biden actually did say something about the pipeline prior to the Ukraine war happening, and then he went through, or I don't know what happened. But basically, let's go ahead and start. Kaizo, did the U.S. attack the pipeline? What are your thoughts on that?
Of course. And I have my evidence. Well, it's not really evidence. It's more like an abstraction. But Russia right now is playing the mimemic theory, right? It's focusing on actually mirroring US's plays. So I know you mentioned earlier, okay, Russia is not going to win on the soft power stuff, but it's not trying to win. It's just trying to mirror the USA. So I do believe that America did actually attack it. And I do believe actually Russia in this case is innocent. As you mentioned before, they could just cut it off. Or they could claim that they don't have enough gas because they've been focusing on the war. There's so many excuses. But I believe, again, America, NATO, Ukraine, it doesn't really matter which one of or a combination of these groups blew it up. Russia, it doesn't make sense to blow it up because economically, right, to fix it up, it's going to take time. And obviously that, it creates a distribution problem. They're still selling gas. Let's be honest, right? It's not like they stopped selling gas. No, Europe cannot survive without gas. Let that sink in, right? It's not going to survive. During winters, old people die, cooking, heat, all that stuff. So Yeah, I do think some combination of America, NATO, or Ukraine most likely blew that gas up. Russia is probably innocent, but then again, Russia is also playing the mirror, the USA tactics game.
Okay, so when you mention Europe still getting gas, right? This is true, but one thing is also true, which is that the United States is supplying a lot of that gas, right? And the Europe rushed through the building of certain infrastructure to receive this gas. Okay, this dirty petrochemical stuff that we typically don't like, and by we I mean the Davos crowd, the Brussels crowd, the European Union crowd. They built that infrastructure real quick, removed the red tape, got that American gas, which also adds to some of the reasons why it redounds to the benefit of the United States for the pipeline to go down, if you will. But the LAR, U.S. or Russia, what makes sense to you? Seems to be rather so far one for the U.S. Okay, you think Biden did this?
I think the prime suspect number one would have been Ukraine, and I think at the same time, if the U.S. did it or didn't do it, probably take credit for it either way. So ultimately, you say, yeah, in a sense. I mean, I don't. The one thing about the U.S. is the U.S. has done so many things overt and covert abroad. You could blame this country for everything. So if he don't say, no, I didn't do it, you can also say, we didn't do it, but maybe we had a hand in it. So technically we did it. You get what I'm saying? So it really doesn't matter at this point. It's just normal. It's going to come off as normal U.S. interference.
I like that you mentioned the it doesn't matter aspect, because as a matter of fact, there are some other things too that a lot of things happen between Russia and Ukraine, or generally in the old Soviet Union. Somebody gets assassinated, the hotel gets bombed, and Russia always thinks the United States is behind it, partially because of the reason that you mentioned, which is like, well, the United States has to allow it. Of course, they are planning this thing, and of course, Condoleezza Rice is whatever. Ever since I'm thinking back in the day now, but this is so it doesn't really even make a difference, right? This thing blows up. They're gonna think it's the United States. Probably is the United States. Doesn't matter if it's the United States. It's still the United States. But so MOT, what do you think about this basic question here of whether or not we did this?
We never would do something like this. Like, one of the major complaints during the actual election cycle was gasoline and energy prices itself. I remember the last time something similar like this happened. I was sitting in the same spot that I am sitting in right now in Bethel, Pennsylvania, and after this attack, I seen diesel go from 4.99 to like $6 overnight everywhere. When I was sitting in the parking lot watching it, because I'm about to go fuel right now because it's pretty low right now, but I know that this stuff is going to be higher. You have to understand that Russia is an energy producer. Any disruption of flow of energy is going to make their energy a hell of a lot more expensive for everyone across the board, because we allow energy companies to take advantage of any stoppage or shortage of transport of fuel anywhere. So it doesn't make any sense for us to pay more at the pump, which most people think about more than any other issue in the country. But it just doesn't make any sense for Russia to attack their pipeline. And as of right now, with the Washington Post, they're saying that it is still inconclusive that Russia has even attacked their own stuff. But they do benefit, because this is about a benefit and who loses. If they're an energy producer, the only asset that they have becomes more expensive to ship and actually sell to people. And that's the only card that they have to play right now. So I don't think that the U.S. would do something like that. Would I think that Russia would orchestrate something like that to happen, to charge people in Europe a hell of a lot more for fuel? Obviously, that would be the case. So it would be the opposite of that. I don't think the Biden administration would actually be with doing anything like that, given that they just lost an actual midterm and possibly given something to actually hold over the head of other people with the next coming 2024 election. So I disagree with the assertions on the other side based on the history of that. And I'm in the actual transportation field and I'm affected by fuel prices by a day-to-day basis. So I have to keep track of these things through databases.
Okay, makes sense. Now, Kaiser earlier said that Russia is still selling, and you alluded to the fact that they can charge more even if they're not selling right now, but the asset that they have, they can increase that price by, cutting down the supply basically. And all that makes sense. And you're saying that it is also not politically expedient for Biden to do this. Now, the pipeline was blown up on the 22nd of around September, and the midterms were in results for the midterms, I believe, were in November or something around that time. But I still get your point. Around that time, around September, there was still all the talk about inflation and all that stuff. So it would be kind of crazy unless they had a really sure hand, or unless they really, really, really had to do it. It does not make political sense to do it. Okay. Now that makes sense. Mike V, what are your thoughts on that front? Yeah, but first of all, let's hear from Joe Biden. And this was before the attack, before Russia attacked Ukraine. Here's what he said:
if Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will.
So
we will what?
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Okay, so now it's just funny, right? It's just a funny situation where he said that, and then the thing happens, and then it's so Mike V, what are your initial thoughts here?
It's been widely speculated that the U.S. had deep sea diving operations to go in there and disrupt the pipeline from coming into Germany right before winter, so that there can be no sort of dependencies going back to Russia. Gazprom actually paid for the pipeline to begin with, so they would be the ones losing out on all of the investment here. We do know also that the Texas gas companies down there are shipping gas from Texas all the way up to Germany to backfill for that, and that was a part of the conflict in Syria, that they wanted to run a pipeline from Qatar all the way up into Syria through Turkey and into Europe to cut Russia off. And that operation did not work. So next course of action is to disrupt the pipeline. Now, who did it? The Russians speculated back in October that it was the UK that did it, that the UK and the Canadians had sabotaged the pipeline. But the EU was supposed to launch an investigation, and they said that it's inconclusive, as well as the Swedes, the Swedish Coast Guard, or whoever the investigative committee out there was supposed to look into that, and they also came back with no conclusion as to who did it. But Sergei Lavrov in October said that it was the UK and the Canadians.
Got it. Now, journalist Hersh, and that's Seymour Hersh, he was the one that uncovered the My Lai massacre back in the Vietnam days. And I believe he also was responsible for part of the uncovering of the Abu Ghraib, whatever, prison abuses, right? Now, he has a rather detailed covering of this, where he kind of goes through how the U.S. did it, right? And these types of journalists, they have their deep type sources or whatever. It's almost like a novel. It may be true or may not be true, but he has a good track record, if you will, of uncovering things like this. And it was very detailed. And it's a plausible plan. It's a kind of plan that perhaps the CIA has in its drawer, right? Of going down there with a stealth submarine and some frogmen and whatnot, and doing all kinds of things, planting a bomb, they say, so just so in case they can use it later, even if they don't have to use it right now. But anyways, given do you think anything will come of this? Let me ask MOT this question here. Let's say it was the US that did this and it was open. Is this an act of war? This is a private installation, right? Gazprom runs this. Will it be considered an act of war, and what will be the repercussions of doing this kind of thing? Is this also another reason why you think it's unlikely that the US did it?
I mean, I just don't think it'd be an act of war. This is a private company, you know. I just don't know. I don't have enough information to either say one way or another. But I know how this war is going to end going forward outside of the situation. I know how that's going to end. But these things, I don't even think that much of it. I mean, it's a disruption. Prices go up, dependencies swap from one place to another. And that's just the way that thing's going to go for a while. So you kind of like on a wait and see thing. I mean, I don't think it's an act of war. No, I don't think so.
Can you tell us real quick how the war is going to end, or is it a long, elaborate thing?
Yeah, it's a long, elaborate thing, and yeah. So I mean, because it's going to end one or two ways for one side or another. So
got it. Okay, we might touch on that again, but let's talk about something else. Okay, you may have not have heard, ladies and gentlemen, listening and liking and sharing the stream, that there was a little balloon, okay, a little Chinese-controlled white balloon that was seen. You know, took a little vacation between January 28th and February 4th. Okay, the question here is, well, first of all, was a large white balloon spotted in United States airspace? You typically don't do that kind of stuff, right? You typically don't just show up uninvited, unannounced in other people's airspace. Even if it was a, shall we say, spy mission, is a particularly stupid one. It doesn't make any sense to do this kind of thing, right? So one of the things that comes to mind is it's rather bizarre. The United States kind of let it flow for a while and then ended up shooting it down. It was seen around Alaska, Western Canada, and other parts of the contiguous United States. Now, was this some kind of a, Kaiser, what do you think about this balloon? Do you think it was a mistake on the Chinese part? Was it like a slap in the face type move? We're just gonna shit in the living room and you guys can't do anything about it, like a test like that? Or it was just like, it's a little embarrassment, they lost control of it or something like that? What do you think about this white Chinese balloon? Are you there, Kaizo? Oh, you're muted. But before Kaizo comes through,
can you repeat that, please? This one.
Can I repeat it? Are you freaking kidding me, sir? What do you think about the Chinese balloon?
Oh, the blowing up?
No, never mind. LAR, what do you think about the Chinese balloon?
At the end of the day, I know China said it was a weather balloon, right? Mm-hmm. And the United States is like, people, it's a spy balloon. I think a lot of this stuff pokes fun at the idea that things are so secure. You know, like nothing can happen. Like like as far as this country having a great, great defense system and great defense team. And I understand that, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, that long stretch does a lot for defense. But I also think that people aren't, let's just say it was a spy balloon. I don't think other people are really afraid to take shots at this country like that. Because I think on the flip side, if I was just to go with the assumption that China spying on America, my thought is like, this country spies on everybody. So what? It's upset that somebody decided to spy back? Like, I don't get it. Sometimes, this whole, if it could have been a weather balloon. There are weather balloons. Other people have to have weather too. But at the same time, What are all these satellites for? If that was the case, you could have caught that balloon a long time ago. I don't think people realize that even though technology is massive and technology can do a lot of things, sometimes it's not the technology, there are a lot of incompetent people at the helm. So to lose a balloon from China to America is one thing. To not be able to see a balloon from China to America on America, that's a whole nother thing too. So to me, it's just all silly.
The competence thing that you mentioned, you see, people always think that there's some kind of ironclad system somewhere. And no, all you just have is human beings working. If we take it down to the level of, let's say, a corporation, people may look at Google, for example, and think it's this angel filled with angels, or maybe not good angels if you don't like Google, but filled with very competent, smooth machine that runs but no, that's not the truth. You still have Bob from accounting who's a dipshit, and people are typically crap no matter where you go, right? The same complaints about the HR people, the same complaints about the meetings that have no freaking point to them, the same complaints about the projects that take too long and the initiatives that the same brown nosing and politicking. Same thing occurs wherever you find human beings, and this all the way up to the government. And in areas of the government, for example, even if they're willing and they're dedicated and capable, but you have to understand the mass of the whole thing and the prioritization that they have to have, right? It's like, a balloon went stray, but that's not really what we were looking for per se, right? That kind of thing. But for sure, we spy on people spy on us. That is the thing that we do. But this balloon being so conspicuous like that and being such a stupid thing, and it's not even, the balloon wasn't going to help them, right? In terms of what they can already get from us, okay, both on the ground and use of satellites. So it was just kind of silly, and it's interesting. But MOT, what are your thoughts about this Chinese balloon found over United States airspace? MOT, you there, or you're muted?
All right. So with this actual particular situation, it comes with a situational awareness of how the military works. You have to have coordination with the United States military before you just start sending things over into people's airspace. Now, let me give you an example. When there used to be hijackings of planes, the actual operational modus operandi was to do whatever the person said, until they start crashing planes into buildings. Now the actual pilot is never going to relinquish the cockpit to anybody for any reason. There was an update in actual procedure by the United States Air Force. Now, whenever you fly something unannounced over airspace, it's going to be shot down. What you're seeing now is something that was never actually, and I think it's a very dangerous thing to tell the public that things are actually being shot down by other people, because that's none of the public's real general business. Now, if an actual spy or a registered agent, which is also a spy, or unregistered agent is a spy, does something and they get locked up for something that they tried to do, transfers of military secrets and whatnot, that should be allowed to be made public. But all of these things that happen between countries should be silent to the actual public, because they don't know how to digest the information, and it really opens the door for any administration to manipulate the actual threats, so that way they can be used in ways that they're not meant to be used. These are military things. They don't need to be talked about by anyone. And yes, when you don't coordinate with people, and you have previous instances of embarrassing the United States because of non-coordination, they're just going to start shooting everything down, which they should be doing in the first place. But at the end of the day, it was a public and actual embarrassment to the United States to have something coming in our airspace and actually be going for such a long time. So now they're just going to shoot them down as they come up. A lot of people have said that NORAD is asleep at the wheel and all this. No, that's not it. There needs to be coordination when things even go off course. That's what air traffic control is about. Air traffic control hands off from one place to another. If a plane strays into another person's airspace, they have to check that with the actual place where they're going actually through. No actual checks and balances happen. They shoot planes down, and planes have been shot down by militaries for unidentified aircraft. And that's all this is: unidentified aircraft, no call signal, no call sign, no flight path. They have to treat it as a threat until said otherwise. So there was an update in policy. And what you're seeing is the updated policy, but I'm not okay with people just announcing that things are being shot down or shot over other things. I'm not okay with that.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike V, what are your thoughts here? Your thoughts as to because what MOT has laid down is, okay, well, things will stray off, and you should have coordination, and policy is updated, and whatnot. MOT, if you don't mind muting your microphone, policy is updated, and all that kind of stuff. But either from the Chinese end, which might just be one of their stray things and they did not coordinate, or was this on purpose or whatever, you may feel free to speculate on that, or also perhaps speculate on or comment on the fact that it was announced publicly like this, or the fact that it was kind of seen in the airspace, kind of held, allowed to move for a while and then shut down. Perhaps that was not the right move after you let it hang around that long. Anyways, go ahead, Mike. Mr. V, you there?
Sorry,
You're
I'm
muted.
sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I just find it interesting, and I don't disagree with MOT at all. I think that is a a PR disaster to be announcing these type of things. But I'd be curious about as to where are they coming from in the first place. They didn't just suddenly float in U.S. airspace out of nowhere. And so initially, when I first heard that these balloons were propping up, that they were quote unquote Chinese balloons, we did just go through the Chinese Lunar New Year, which is in January. So I thought maybe they have been letting balloons go, from Beijing, and this got kind of out of hand. But saying all of that, they did have balloons floating over Okinawa. There were balloons floating over Manila in the Philippines. Balloons floating over other areas of Southeast Asia too. The same balloons, and so. I don't know personally what they're doing with them. I can only imagine if I'm an adversary, I may be testing the reflexes of every nation state's ability to respond. How are they responding? Where are they responding? How far can I penetrate into their airspace and these sort of things? That's the only way. That's the only thing I can actually come to conclusion on. But why this is happening at this point in this juncture, I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What could they be gathering from it? Data wise, I'm not entirely sure as to how they're collecting this information, right? Whether it's pivoting back to a satellite, is it it's too high up to be cellular because cell phone traffic cuts off after 25,000 feet anyways. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the forensics analysis on this from the US in that regard.
Gotcha. So, Kaiser, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So now, do you mind commenting on this this Chinese balloon?
Yeah.
It's found over here and shot over the United States, but apparently the others found elsewhere as well. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, so before the whole satellite stuff happened, obviously GPS came out of the space race between Russia and America. So before they were actually using balloons as a spy technology. So actually America was in the right to shoot it down for various different reasons. So America did actually look at the report of the actual makeup of this balloon. They actually did find surveillance technology. Now, it's come to light that they claim that the Chinese government has claimed that it was actually a civilian contractor who manufactured the balloon and they were using it for, research purposes, and it strayed off, obviously. But the reality is, these are the facts. The facts are there was surveillance technology found within the balloons. So it could be used for spying. I don't know if that's what, China's going to say, hey, we didn't use. they're gonna say we didn't use it for spying, but yeah, the technology was there for spying purposes already. So the question really here is, okay, and I think I like what Mike V said about testing the responses of each country. Balloon technology is a lot cheaper than satellite technology, right? If they start putting up expensive satellite technology across and veering off into certain paths that is closer to America, right? That's going to be dangerous. Why? It's expensive to replace, to put up, and also let's say the distance that they'll have to put near American space for it to get the relevant information. But with the balloon, it's very cheap. It's easy to manufacture, and also if I like what Mike V said about the whole testing reflexes. They can just put many of them, and it seems like it went through across 5 different countries before it reached American airspace. So clearly, they were able to actually get a really good research information from there. But yeah, the facts are, yes, there was surveillance technology. China claims it was a civilian contractor who actually manufactured it, and it was used for research. But the reality is, this is a very known way of actually spying, and it was used in the Cold War by the Russians and the Americans. So it's just a cheap way to do what you need to do.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden gave a State of the Union speech or address, whatever they call it, recently, and it was nothing particularly crazy, but nothing particularly interesting either. There was some heckling going on by the Republicans, who might think it was a very stupid thing to do because Joe, left to his own devices, wasn't looking that great anyways. No shots to him, but he's an old man, right? Like, so he wasn't doing all that great. But even though he was on some kind of super whatever meds or vitamins or whatever they gave him that evening, I want a piece of that because he was as more spry than usual. But one of the things, okay, that comes up around this State of the Union speech is about entitlement spending. Okay, I believe that Joe Biden accused the Republicans of wanting to cut Social Security, and they're like, no, that's a lie. We're not touching that. Okay, that's the third rail. You don't touch Social Security. You don't touch Medicare. You don't do crap like that. And the people of the United States, okay, both on the left and the right, are not gonna want anybody to touch those things. Okay, even though some people may want to, but because of things, for example, like we see in terms of the spending that goes on with the military-industrial complex, right? When you see all these billions and billions of dollars just being spent, it's kind of hard to stomach the notion that, hey, spent on what, right? The military-industrial complex is spending on what? Spending on endless wars, silly things that could have been prevented, right? That has been the recent history of what goes on as far as the military, the United States military. So billions and billions being spent, then you want to cut entitlement for the people. That's not going to happen. Let me start with MOT on this one, okay? Now, whether you cut taxes or you give entitlements, it's still all spending, right? It's still all that thing that goes out of as far as this kind of complicated balance sheet with the United States government, right? Talking about spending, cutting taxes is not, cutting taxes is an expenditure, okay? So would you take let me give you tell me what you would do. You have to do on both sides. You have to go on the entirety of fiscal policy, meaning the taxing and the spending, raising the taxes and adjusting the entitlement programs, restructuring the adjustment programs, because both of them have to be done if we don't have some great technological breakout that breaks us out of the constant. Okay, let me put one more thing here, just for the general understanding of the audience, right? So I'm saying that, look, of course, technology can come and save us, right? We can come up with this new great thing, typically in the space of energies where it's most impactful, right? Energy impacts everything else. We can come up with fusion tomorrow and boom, what deficit, right? Everything gets super more efficient, right? Because the idea is if you keep on with the same technology, you're going to be putting the same inputs to get similar outputs, right? You're not getting any more efficient because you have the same kind of technology, but you're projecting into the future. You're borrowing from the future because you want to grow, you want to expand. That's generally how it goes. But if you keep on, this debt to GDP ratio keeps rising and rising and rising, it begs, it stands to reason that it cannot go on forever. But every now and again, new technology comes in and helps us out. But MOT, no new technology. Forget the new technology stuff. You've been taxed with, hey, what do you do with the taxes? And what do you do with the entitlements? What do you do?
You're damn right they're entitlement programs because they're insurance programs. Like, we have to correct what these things are called and for what reason. You're not entitled to a tax cut. You are entitled to Medicare and Social Security because those are insurance programs. The premiums come out of your paycheck to pay for these programs. Now, these funds have been tapped to pay for tax cuts. I say this. Anybody who lobbies for cuts to these programs, lock them up in prison for life, unless they can provide an actual proof that cutting entitlements, because they're not entitlements. Like, the way they're looking at it, oh, these people are entitled. Yes, they're entitled to it because it's an insurance program. No different than life and health insurance. If you pay health insurance, you're entitled to a certain level of health insurance. You pay life insurance, you're entitled to a certain life insurance. So what the Republicans do around the debt ceiling, if you paid attention to it over the past 40 years, they've lobbied for more tax cuts in order to not hurt seniors and people who are on disability. These are insurance programs versus their tax giveaways to actual corporations. I think that anybody in this country who presents them as entitlements should be prosecuted to the highest extent of the law. Should be prosecuted for deliberately lying to the people about not knowing basics about how fiscal policies work. There is no reason to not know that these things are insurance programs. Like me, I'm in the trucking industry. I don't get the same tax cuts as JB Hunt, CR England, Knight Swift, because their companies are bigger. No, we run off the same business model. But at the end of the day, they get more tax cuts and breaks than I do because they pay for them to be put into the tax code. Like the corporations are paid for their actual ability to want Social Security and Medicare cut, so that way they can decrease their tax liability. So when you have individuals who don't understand how taxes work, and they're not millionaires or billionaires at all, I say lock these people up and make them prove it in front of a court of law. Show them on the calculator how taking in less money is going to provide more benefits. The problem is we don't even understand the system of what we're trying to cut. And these seniors who actually voted these actual conservatives in office, this is the reason why they was mad at Bush. Because Bush came in and tried to cut Medicare and Social Security the moment he won the 2004 election. And actual Mike Pence came out of his mouth and directly said, it's time to cut entitlement spending. I know we don't want to look up Mike Pence because this is somehow we don't even want to even cover what Republicans do while they're in office, but this is what's going on. This is not an actual old thing every single time. It doesn't matter whether it was the actual extending, what do you call it, unemployment benefits under actual Obama. It was the same thing. They wanted to hold the quote unquote what they think is entitlement spending, but is actual insurance programs hostage, so that way they can give more tax cut to corporations. I think if you does not make over $1 million, if you at all lobby for tax cuts to people, you should be in prison for the rest of your natural life for not knowing how these things work and lobbying for things that hurt other people within this country because you don't know how they work.
The lobby prison. I like it. I like it. So the basic scenario, okay, because the question was, okay, what will you do on the spending side? What will you do on the taxing side? Okay, because taxes need to go up, and
in order to pay for things.
Yeah, in order to pay for things, there's certain kinds of spending that you're talking about, which amounts to tax cuts. In other words, the spending is going towards corporations, and that will be the only direction. The benefits are going to only flow to the people whom can pay for politicians. You didn't say this, but it seems like the benefit can only flow to people who can pay for politicians, and that'll be the big lobby asking for tax cuts in their particular brackets, big real estate people being able to do that crazy net operating loss or whatever the hell they call it.
Yeah, but this is a Grover Norquist thing. Like, he should have been locked up for RICO charges years ago when he kept doing this. Like, this is a Grover Norquist pet project. Like, people are paid in the right wing media to push this tax cuts phenomenon thing so that way they can get more benefits for corporations at the expense of insurance programs. Like, we don't even understand it because most people don't vote, they don't care, and they think that the actual seniors who voted for these people should have the budget being balanced on the backs of those people. At the end of the day, you bring the actual understanding up, you put the laws in place. If we catch you lobbying for tax cuts and you're not a millionaire, you're going to prison for the rest of your natural life. Tax cuts do not create jobs. Tax cuts is an expenditure after all business is being done. Tax cuts do not bring in revenue. You want to know why? Quit your job right now. You will have a 100% less tax burden. How much revenue are you bringing in? Zero. What they've done, if they've actually convinced the American people that the way the tax system works is how a household runs. That's not necessarily the case. You don't have to provide a military for the entire world or anything else, but it's very easy to actually get people to believe in things that are not happening. This is an educational standpoint, and you have to have consequences in place for individuals who do this. Now, I'm part of the military industrial complex. My money's never going away, ever. The tanks that I pull, the things that I move for the military is never going away. No one is ever talking about the greatest expenditure in American society, defense spending. No one lobbies for the cuts in defense spending so that way we can pay for tax cuts so that way we can keep Medicare and Medicaid paid. They always lobby for increased defense spending because as long as the spending is going towards corporations, it's fine. But we're always broke when it comes to funding actual insurance programs for people that they actually paid into. That's the difference between those two things. And you have to prosecute people for deliberately not knowing the answer to those things in order for these things to change.
Okay, makes sense. And I did mention, by the way, the military spending. I said, and that's part of the reason why it's never going to work. This idea of, oh, let's cut the entitlements, if you will, or insurance, is because, hey, everybody knows what goes on with the military industrial complex. Shout out to Dwight Eisenhower. And he was responsible, or part of what we're responsible for creating the military industrial complex, but definitely warned us about it. And part of why it is seen, right? The revolving door between, let's say, Congress and certain companies, the revolving door between military brass and also certain companies as well in the military industrial complex is huge. People always have these kind of complicated systems whereby they're getting paid as a consultant somehow, and everybody is that. But now let me ask LAR, just as a citizen paying taxes, you're a citizen, you're paying taxes. Do you think you're paying enough? And are you confident on whether it's the Medicare and Social Security aspect? Do you think that you'll get that and it'll be worth your while, right? Worth your premium and all other services that you're getting as a tax-paying citizen of the United States, LAR?
Like when I get 65, 70, right?
Yeah.
No. I don't think so. I think this country politically went to bat against pensions. You know, this country can yank your 401k if they want to. I mean, as far as capitalist business and whatnot. But like MOT was talking about Bush Jr. trying to get rid of Medicare and Medicaid. I think with the debt rising and rising and rising, and this country not wanting to make any kind of cuts, I think the people who are older, and this is just an American thing in politics in general, a lot of times these older people in charge, they just want stuff long enough so they can have a sweet life. And when they feel like they're almost out of the door, F everybody else. So, in my opinion, no. I don't think these people are going to, as long as a demographic over 55, 60 years old is quote unquote running the country, and it's weird because you got a over AARP generation basically running the country, and they don't know how to fix anything. And the only way they fix stuff is by screwing people over. And that's how they were raised. That's how they, how they operate politically, no matter what side you're talking about it. You screw people over for your benefit. And I think, corporations know how to pay off politicians. They can put something in their bank account that makes it nice for them. And they'll go, oh, well, we got to figure it out. The debt is now at 50 trillion. We got to do something. Sorry. So, no.
Okay, so Mike V, the same question I had asked earlier, which is, you have the fiscal policy master plan on the spending side and the taxing side, right? We all know that they're all kind of related. MOT has said, hey, cut off that tax cut system for the corporations. And we know the corporations are the ones that can buy the politicians. So that's going to be a tough type of sell, because both parties are corporatists at the end of the day. That's where the money comes from, right? So, and then you have the spending side, right? These insurance policies have indeed been gutted, right? The money has been taken out to benefit whatever cause, including tax cuts for corporations. But so the scenario is this again: the debt to GDP ratio keeps rising. Logic tells us it cannot go on forever. Forget the technological advances that could help us get out of it. What do you do on the tax side and on the spending side? Turn tax up, turn some spending down, like the military, for example, kind of cut off some incentives, some bad incentives in the military industrial complex. What do you say, Mike V?
Well, I think we have to really look at, what are our expenditures, right? What are our CapEx? And we have to ask the question, is it necessary? For example, why did we spend, $150 billion in the last, 6 months on Ukraine? Why are we giving $40 billion to Israel? We spent more money over there than what we spent on African Americans, for example. And the only reason that, you see Republicans or conservatives talking about, cutting the expenditures on Medicare and Medicaid is because Black people in particular benefit the most from these two programs.
Oh, come on, Mike V.
And now if you go across the border,
that's the reason why.
So if you go across the border to Canada, they don't have this problem. They take care of their people when it comes to healthcare coverage. That's not even the conversation up there. You go to every other European, American ally, especially in the EU, that's all taken care of. So they don't have that argument. That's not an argument for them to make. But it's only in the United States that you see this problem really propping up. People laugh at Cuba, but Cuba has one of the best healthcare systems in the West. Who knew, right? And so that's not a conversation. It's only a conversation in the United States because the system, the social spending that happened after 1965, in 1968, largely benefited Black people also. And so when Reagan came into office, there was all of these cuts that they wanted to put into place. And that's why you have a lot of the calamity of poverty in the Black community as well. And so I say all that to say that how they manage this, look at where they're spending their money. The military, gets $1.2 trillion just in the last bill. How much money they're spending there? How much money are they spending in Israel? How much money are they spending in some of their other foreign ventures? A lot of that money could be brought right back home and could be easily spent here. And so on the necessary programs to facilitate more stability in a lot of your urban areas.
Okay, Dr. Thunder, thanks for joining the conversation. I assume or presume you're off in a concert somewhere or something like that, or on the road perhaps. But with regards to stimulating and uplifting certain urban environments, you heard what Mike V just said, that perhaps coming after the entitlement is just a way of coming after a weak constituency or a hated constituency, or, after the Black people. And then you don't have to qualify it. Coming after Black people is always legit, right? Could you react to that? Again, the general conversation is about the budget. We're not going to continue to spend our way out of things, right? However, when the entitlement conversation comes up, Mike V is pointing out that a lot of the benefits go to the Black population, and that's why this is something that is often targeted by perhaps Republicans. What do you have to say to that, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, that's one of my issues with the Republicans. Because every time they talk about, cutting stuff, it tends to be stuff that disproportionately would benefit Black folks. Now, in general, I tend to be I'm pretty cheap, so I want the government to do very, very little, very, very little, just protect folks against other folks, and provide basic stuff like roads and deliver the mail and stuff like that. I know that it's more complicated than that these days, and I know there are other factors to consider, but the simpler model is better. Anything that gets more complex is more opportunities for the government to take advantage of people that can't protect themselves from the government. They don't have resources. So, I'd rather the government be much less girthy and of course I understand why, a lot of Black folks have a lot of distrust with the government. The government has been involved in doing all kinds of nefarious stuff against Black folks in particular, but in general, just against people that didn't have the sort of resources to protect themselves, to have a team of lawyers to find all the loopholes so that they could benefit from it, like the wealthy do. So yeah, it's a riddled with problems. Yeah, there is a tendency for when they do make the cuts, for them to make cuts that hurt people that are poor, and disproportionately Black people are poor. So yeah.
Well put there. Now, and the gentleman that the people, well, Mike V and Man of Tomorrow, that mentioned the military being cut. We might touch on that in terms of what ways can it be more efficient, because when one talks about cutting something like security, it doesn't mean you don't want to have security. It must mean that you're well aware of a whole bunch of waste. Now, waste and government, or just to put it more in a more benign way, the government is not as efficient as the private sector. It never has been, never will be. That's not what it's supposed to do. We don't want it to even be that way, right? It's a different DNA altogether, this efficiency chasing, right, that the market kind of induces. But if we're talking about the military industrial complex, I'm sure there are many efficiencies that could go there. So to that point of efficiencies and ways of getting better, okay, a nice, neat definition of technology that I like is doing more with less. Anything that allows you to do more with less is a technology. It could be a tool, okay, like a wrench or something like that, or it could be a system even, right? A system of farming that allows you to get more yield. That is a technology. Crop rotation is a technology. A horse is a technology. All the things that allow us to do more with less are technology. So we're talking about the economy here, okay? And the way things work is, generally speaking, if you're using the same technology, the same techniques, and you're only maybe getting incrementally more efficient year over year, you're going to be amassing the debt in the kind of capitalism that we have. The kind of capitalism that we have is you borrow against the future, and then you grow into the future. You say, hey, future, give me a few more trillion, okay? I'm going to spend it over here, over there, give this guy, do that thing, build this road. And trust me, by the time we get to your time, in 10 years from now, we'll have 10 trillion. That's what businesses do in terms of business debt. That's what households do too, in terms of, let's say, housing or whatever it may be. So the idea is you're borrowing from the future, but you got to grow into the future. But we're not growing as fast as the debt is increasing, unless, of course, you have this intermittent spikes of technological bursts. So Kaizo, we know about the technological burst in the past decades in the space of software, right? The space of software is great, but that obscures the fact that the space of your real life is very much like 1970s. Okay, if you look at 1970s future movies, there is no flying car and replicator from Star Wars or those things from the Jetsons. Those things are not there. In other words, in the space of atoms, in the space
Right.
of stuff, in the space of stuff, we're in the 1970s. The only difference is this screen. This screen, and all the magic that's been going on in this screen has been deceiving us into thinking, oh, the growth. So the growth comes from technology, because technology is the way that you do more with less. If you don't get that technological growth, you're going to be having a lot of problems with regards to feeding your people and the debt and all those other kinds of things, which cannot sustain forever by just having military dominance and whatnot, especially when you have enemies. So technology-wise, what do you foresee? Well, let me ask you this one question, and then you can comment on the side of it. Do you think that we're going to grow fast enough to get out of this? Because we already know that most of the technological increase has been here, again, in the screens, in the world of software. In the world of transportation, in the world of energy, and in the world of stuff, we're still way behind. Do you think, for example, that whether you can pick fusion, we'll get there as quickly as we can? You can think. Well, let me let you answer. The question has gone on too long already. Go ahead. Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let me answer that question on the multi-pronged solution, right? So, will we grow fast enough? Well, first of all, who is we, right? 60% of the world.
The only one that matters, right? It's like everything else is a collateral damage of.
I'll explain what I mean, right?
But go ahead.
So there's untapped markets, right? Especially in Africa and parts of Asia, South Asia, right? What that means is there's billions of people that haven't actually been inculcated into the current market base as it is right now. So actually, when you say, will we grow fast enough? We can actually take this route here and say, okay, look, what's the biggest stock exchanges in Africa? Johannesburg in South Africa. There's obviously the one in Nigeria and one in Kenya, right? These are three of the bigger stock exchanges. Well, what does that mean? How is that relevant to the rest of us? Well, when you talk about growth, right, the rest of us can we can levy, right, our monies and economics on a market that hasn't actually caught up yet. So we could actually be the investors on a stock exchange. So we don't even have to do anything in reality.
Hold on to that for a second. I like that, because that's a good solution for the individual, and I want you to actually continue on that line, right? But also, before you continue on that line, the technology question, okay? Because still, you're still going to run out of pie if the technology doesn't. Yeah, there's you're talking about frontier spaces. We have frontier spaces. We still have wild west spaces or white space where we can kind of off gas our growth into, if individuals, middle class individuals, choose to make that kind of a move, right? Shout out to me. I'm over here in Africa right now doing those kinds of things. So on the individual level, that can be solutions. I want you to touch on that later. But the technology that will need to increase the pie in general, for example, the fusion, hardware. For example, the hardware stuff, what are your thoughts as to the possibility and through what avenues?
Okay, cool. So great question. Great question. So hardware has so much possibilities. Why am I saying this? After the Japanese fall from grace, right, and being overtaken by China, which is more focused on both hardware and software, Japan was more of an artisan of hardware, right? Anyways, I'm going to skip all that. Point here is hardware has definitely lagged behind software. There's a huge latency. What that means is anyone that can actually fill that hole, that missing space between hardware and software, that's the next, that's the first trillionaire, actually. Elon Musk, again, is a combination between hardware and software, right? He's got SpaceX trying to deliver us, we're going to put you to Mars. Well, he says 2030, that's not going to happen. But 2050, hey, maybe he puts that into Mars, right? Maybe he's going to allow us to start building on hardware that's going to allow us to survive the sun's rays, right? All that kind of stuff. Hydroponic plant growth within Martian space. All of that is where the hardware space comes in. And not just hardware, also the physiological hardware as well, right? Genetic engineering. That's the stuff that's lagging, right? Physics, chemistry, math. Hey, we know a lot. But biology, we really don't know enough compared to what we should know right now. So I would like to kind of merge the two.
We don't even know what a woman is.
Okay, no, this guy. No, we definitely know what a woman is. It's an XX chromosome, sometimes XXY, but that's the intersex. Anyways, yeah. But the
Adults,
point is,
human,
right
female.
now,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, there's a missing spot between biophysiological hardware development, aka gene editing, right, genetic engineering, as well as actual physical hardware, the silicon-based semiconducting space. But the reason why this is slower, we know why, right? Where do we get these so-called? I'll explain and I'll kind of present a possible solution. Software is easy, right? Because all we have to do is just increase the terabytes space within our computers, and also maybe reduce the size of the transistors, right? Make them as small as possible, compute as fast as possible with the size limitation, right? But when it comes to real hardware, sort of, as you mentioned, let's say a machine that can make molecular machine that can basically make a burger out of nowhere, right? It's just you input some proteins, some plants, and you can reconvert between that energy stuff. Reason why we can't do that, main reason is actually lack of minerals. Rare earth minerals are essentially useful for this kind of technology. There's only a few places where you found them, and one of them is Congo. And right now, actually, since the 90s, there is a no trade deal with any country through Congo, meaning anything that we get right now to make your computers, your iPhones function is through illegal trade with countries like Rwanda and Uganda that are actually stealing these mineral resources with the aid of American companies. So one of the issues actually really is if a company is going to go into this sort of space, because if you notice, all the iPhones are the same. There really is no difference, right? It's a little bit faster, a slightly new, better camera, but there's no real innovation. We are lacking on the actual minerals that are required for scalability and also base research. So it is a materials problem.
Gotcha. An actual materials problem in general. And there's some small spaces that are being solved with regards to this replicator type technology, right? Where you put in inputs and you get stuff. It doesn't sound like much at this point, but in the space of foods, liquid foods, it's being solved. Reason for that is the fact that it's about 95% water, right? You go to your drink aisle, right? It's about 95% water is whatever drink is, right? And then the things that make up for the color, the mouthfeel, and the odor and the taste and all that kind of stuff, tiny percentage. And things like alcohol, we already know what the percentages are by volume, right? And such, right? So we can combine those things. But a great technological breakthrough that has gone recently, and I made a video about it recently, is taking about 80 compounds and recreating all the biochemical and not biochemical, the carbon compounds, the organic chemistry compounds that's responsible for taste, color, and the mouthfeel and the odor of all the things that we take in. Okay, it's not fake flavor. This is you taste wine. What is making the wine that way could be replicated by some machine. But let me hop back to Dr. Thunder real quick, and then I'll get to you, LAR. I want to ask you, Dr. Thunder, because we're talking about technology, and one of the ways that you can expand technologically is perhaps take off some of the handcuffs, which will be regulation. Because, by the way, some people could speculate that one of the reasons why we're not making as much progress in the realm of atoms, which is real world stuff, as we're making in the world of cyberspace, is because cyberspace was not so heavily regulated, right? You could just go in there and drop some vaporware or whatever. Next thing you know, you got $1 billion company, that kind of thing. So not a lot of regulation, but these days it takes forever to, it takes a couple of years to build a bridge, in the 1920s. And then you want to add a lane to the bridge in 2020, it'll take you 40 years. Those kinds of things in the world of real space. So are you down for, and this is, I want an emotional reaction. It's not like this is your area of study or anything. The pulling away of certain regulations within the space. Do you think that perhaps we've over-regulated ourselves within the space of physical things? That's why we see all the technological growth in the space of software. You there, Dr. Thunder?
Hey, can you rephrase the question? Say it again.
Do you think we need to take down regulation in the space of actual stuff, energy, transportation, right? let's build some more nuclear power plants, to give more to context. Let's drill baby drill, right? That kind of thing, because that'll be another path to getting more efficiency or more technological growth. One way is to obviously invent new things, but another way perhaps is to remove regulation. And some would say even that the regulation is making it such that we're not inventing new things. What are your thoughts with regards to over-regulating the space for technological growth? Yes or no? Do you think that we need to be more or less regulatory?
It is true that without regulation, you can advance quicker. But the downside is, though there were substantial leaps forward in medicine by what the Nazis were doing, experimenting on people and doing all kind of stuff, they were able to actually learn a lot really quickly. But obviously, you don't want to you don't want to do things that violate people's basic rights. They're so the question is not as much about, the way I perceive it, an adequate answer to the question is not really about, it's not really a yes or no. It's more of a, how do you do this in a way that facilitates the most technological advancement quickly, but that also doesn't abuse our responsibility, that doesn't take away from our responsibility to honor, take care of the sacrament of creation, the planet, other people, so that's always the challenge. If it was a matter of a temporary measure, I could see saying, okay, Armageddon the movie, but in real life, and we need to fix this issue, or else all of humanity dies within 2 months or something. Then I can see throwing off all restrictions and saying, we got to do this, because if we don't do it now, we're done. But unfortunately, the way that things work is that when the government makes policy, it doesn't usually change the policy, because it's used that policy now. It doesn't need that policy. No, they want to keep it on the books so that they can keep taking advantage of. They can make as much money as possible, get as much kickbacks from their cronies, and operate as the greedy corporatists that they are. So that's a challenge. That's a challenging question. I mean, I'm a technology guy. I mean, everybody's seen my studio, and then I've got a lot of gear, a lot of instruments, a lot of pedals for this, pedals for that, and all kinds of stuff. It's a lot of technology. So I like technology, and I'm a power user. I have an iPad. Most people just use the iPad so that they can draw some doodles or something, and they can watch Netflix on the go or something. The way I use it is actually quite integrated into most of what it is that I do musically. So I've got a huge collection of sheet music on the iPad. So there's certain things that I would like to see advance, but I'm also aware that my iPad is, the fact that I got it for the price that I got it is probably because of some other folks in the world being exploited. What are you gonna do? It's a terrible issue. And I've been married for 15 years. When I gave my wife the ring, I'm sure it was blood diamonds. I didn't, I wasn't really thinking about that at that point. But there's anything that we do here has an effect on other people. It's very much like I was having a talk to my dad. I was talking to my dad yesterday, and we were talking about how his mother, my grandmother, is going to be 95 years old, and she's still sharp and everything. And I was teasing him, and I said, "Oh, you know, that means you're old then." And he's like, "Yeah, and it's worse every day." And he kind of went a little dark with it. I kind of felt bad about saying he was old, although it was obviously a joke. But anyhow, but we got into talking about how everything affects everything else, like on your body. So like, you may think that, you know, if you have a cold, it doesn't affect your pinky toe, but yeah, it is affecting your pinky toe. You may think that if you have a muscle strain, you know, in your left wrist, that it doesn't affect your shoulders, or it doesn't affect your circulation, or it doesn't affect whatever. There's no true isolation, and I'd argue that it's the same thing in the world economy, and of course the economy is a made up thing, right? It's not organic. It's a totally human made sort of thing. So yeah.
Oh, well answered there, sir. And by the way, because I asked you about the taking back of certain regulations so that perhaps we can accelerate the technological increase in the world of stuff like energy and transportation, as opposed to the world of bits, and that because this might end up taking us out of the economic route that we're in, okay, because that's the way we have to do things. We have to get more efficient if we're going to be borrowing from the future. We're promising the future that we're getting more efficient.
So the real, so in my mind, the real answer to this question is the government has to start doing what it expects the citizens to do. It expects the citizens to stay within their means. Every time somebody says, "Hey, I'm not making enough money," or taxes are too big or too high or whatever, it says, "Well, you need to stay within your means and blah blah blah. Be smarter with your money." This is the kind of counsel that folks get, but they're not doing that. They don't do that at all. And I understand that it's a bit of apples and oranges, but in one sense at least, I don't really want to be spending a bunch of time listening to cats that have no idea of how to operate within any kind of balanced budget. I don't really need to take counsel from them. It seems like I'm doing a better job than they are in that way. So yeah. All
indeed,
right.
Indeed, well put. Because I was gonna just reiterate the fact that, as a matter of fact, in order to receive a lot of the gas that the United States is now supplying to Europe, they couched a lot of their environmental regulations and built these receiving stations on the quick. Okay, so yes, governments don't change their stuff. Once they grow a new appendage, they don't want to cut it off, right? But when push comes to shove, they will make certain kinds of moves. Now, but this is a bad prediction in the sense that if we're only gonna be like, hey, you know what, screw it, let's start making nuclear power plants, when something really bad happens, then that really bad thing might take us out before we're able to, pull out of that kind of stuff, if you will. Now, let me ask you here, LAR, okay? Are you a fan of technology? Do you think that the basic thesis which I gave here of like, look, they promised us flying cars and all we got was 50 characters on Twitter, right? And we got screens that distract us from the fact that the infrastructure is decrepit, the transportation is not moving faster, the energy is still, it's not as more. Look, we don't have the things that we could have, and then definitely don't have some of the crazier science fiction type things. Do you share the sentiment, even divorced from the fact that it may or may not be what we need in order to advance economically? But what do you sense in terms of the technology and the futurist promises from the 80s and whatnot?
When I was a kid, I was a fan of the Jetsons, so I wanted my flying car, but wasn't no black people in the Jetsons.
Woo!
So, I am scared of this future. The thing about it is, technology for the most part is growing and evolving, but people are devolving. And what I'm seeing, I think when you're talking about technology, you're talking about smart people doing innovative things that push society further to infinity and beyond, as the cartoons would say, right? But we're using technology for entertainment. Like, I forget that movie with Bruce Willis where everybody was sitting. Huh?
Ninja technology?
Pretty much. You know, we're using, I forgot the Bruce Willis movie when everybody was sleeping in the house in the metaverse, basically, not doing anything. Or Idiocracy. Like, we're using technology to entertain ourselves more and not really get things done. So, because when you look at people, people with a skill set to create something is dwindling, in my opinion. Like, people can't necessarily do anything hands-on. You know, even the smart people who are quote unquote smart people who are doing tech and coding and whatnot, they're replacing themselves by coding themselves out of existence with AI. So I don't necessarily know how this is going to go, because when I think about in America, how they say half of the population is over 55. So half of those people are going to be gone probably in the next 10, 20 years. You know, when you talk about people like Elon Musk, like, who do you think is going to, when earlier we talked about the competence, the look of incompetence, or the thought of the government being incompetent, where do you think all of these competent business people are going to come from? Because most of these people, unfortunately, you get the, quote unquote, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Normally their kids turn into Paris Hilton. And now you're going to have an issue where it's going to be far more Paris Hiltons than you actually have people who are willing to try to actually push technology further. It's good in theory, but people, that's the issue. I know they said like later on, the biggest economy be China, then India, then the US. Well, that should tell you where the US is gonna go. Like, we're gonna still be on Netflix and chill time.
So, MOT, you're in the transportation business, right? We have transportation infrastructure and also shall we say, the planes, the trains, the automobiles, right? The actual things moving you around. And then we have energy in there also. So when I talk about the space of technological growth in the world of atoms, in the world of real stuff, as opposed to digital stuff, transportation is it's a nice nexus where all those things come together. Again, the infrastructure, the energy, and all that. Do you share the sentiment here that basically I don't really think it's a sentiment. It's more like asking what you think about the fact that technological growth has been isolated to the world of chips, and perhaps do you think there could be more technological advancements, perhaps you using your transportation industry, because we do need this in order to grow ourselves out of this crazy debt bubble that the whole world is in. What are your thoughts as to technological improvement within the space of atoms, perhaps concentrated in the transportation sector?
Well, you have to understand that this has to be a top-down policy proposal from the government to guide where the actual technology is going to land, or even if it's not a government proposal, a family proposal, where you put people in position to take care of things. Most companies want to produce very small things and make a very large profit out of it. They do it with as little as people as possible. I do get your point. We're not creating as many actual geniuses per capita like we used to. Because why? We're resting on our laurels and everybody wanted to be influencers rather than go out and influence the world outside of a computer, because of the actual ease of actually just turning on the camera and doing stupid things and being rewarded for it. For me, that's why it takes forward-thinking people to actually do this. Like, I don't think the Elon Musk that I think that they're going to have groups of people that's going to be doing these type of things on their behalf. I don't think they're going to be doing it at all. I don't think the kids are going to be anywhere near even any of the levers of the actual new money-making positions that are going forward. I think they're going to be giving money like Bill Gates have done with his, family, and that's going to be it. It's just that it takes the people that are already on the ground that's going to be creating the actual opportunities for people to fit into, not the other way around. Like a lot of people want those easy peasy jobs from the federal government or anything else to actually guide them to the future. You have to be out there on the ground a generation earlier in order for these things to happen. And they're not going to happen by just sitting out around being influencers on TikTok all day. So you got to have innovators, and the power is going to go to the innovators, to the people who are actually invested in it. I don't think it's anything that we need to be worried about right now. Chat GPT is going to be taking a lot of people out of their bloated jobs that are in their actual field, but they can still skill up. The people who refuse to skill up, it's just going to be in UBI zones. I don't care about that. Buying a whole bunch of real estate, setting up, plans for housing to be in these areas. But it's just that there's going to be a choice: innovate or UBI zone. Those are the only two choices for people right now. Right now, everybody wants to leverage ignorance for actual profit. What happens when you don't be able to do that anymore? What happens when YouTube or TikTok or Facebook, everybody just gets together like, you know what, we're throwing this whole relationship conversation offline. Why? We're garnering too many weirdos who's actually trying to make a living off of people's pain. What happens then? These people get to go back to what they were doing before these things actually came across. I'm not worried about the people who's going to be left behind. I'm going to be one of the people who's going to be moving forward with the actual technology. I know exactly where my industry is going, but a lot of people are trying to fit out with where their actual place within each industry is going. I say don't worry about it. I say the people who don't want to innovate will get the rewards of what they're doing, and the people who don't will get the rewards of UBI zone. I'm not truly worried about all that much. And let me add something with the regulatory piece. If it wasn't for the National Transportation Safety Board, we would not know what happened in any plane crash, because corporations are not going to investigate themselves. It took the government to come out to investigate these things, make changes to actual policy so that way flying can be safer. Same thing with any other accident that happens. Like, you cannot expect, if you get rid of the EPA, that corporations are going to regulate themselves. In fact, I think when you lobby for less regulations, again, you should be in prison for the rest of your life, no trial. Because if you're dumb enough to think that corporations are going to regulate themselves, you don't even belong in the society with us. You belong behind bars. You're a very dangerous person, and you don't belong out here walking around the most of us, despite how much money you get paid as an industry lobbyist.
Industry lobbyist. So Mike V, okay, Kaizo mentioned earlier, and then MOT is talking about the fact that individuals will innovate. Some will be left behind. TikTok will give you the United States algorithm, and all our kids will become influencers, shaking their butts, and their kids will be doing 996. You know what 996 is? That's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's a particular kind of Chinese work model. 996, 996, all day, mathematics and all that kind of good stuff. But anyways, Mike V, the topic on the table here, we kind of veered from the speech, the State of the Union speech, into talking about the economy, the bloated debt. One of the ways to get out of that, after we talked about the taxing and spending, is to break out technology-wise. We'll get to Chat GPT in a second, which is yet another example of technological improvement, but still in the world of bits, okay, in a data center somewhere. But meanwhile, the roads, the transportation, and all these other kinds of things are in a deplorable state. Now, Mike V, what opportunities do you see? Kaiser talked about some things for an individual economically, taking advantage of things in Africa. I think it's a great thing too. Obviously, when one talks about things like this in Frontiersville, we have to, I like giving the warning that this is an entrepreneurial endeavor. This is not some kind of guaranteed nonsense. So that, because you see comments all over YouTube all the time, like, oh, I did what he said and I lost my money. It's like, well, screw you. I don't want you to do anything if you're thinking like that. But if somebody understands risk and reward, then there's still places that are still frontier where you can make the economic breakthrough. But beyond the individual economic breakthrough, Mike V, what are some technological things that we can put our eyes on out there within the world of real stuff that could perhaps take us out of the economic problems?
I think that's a broad question. Someone who works in technology like myself, what I would say here is that we need to be on the cutting edge, and we're not at the cutting edge as it stands right now. China is basically running circles around us when it comes to infrastructure development and actual human development. We know that they're graduating at least 2 to 3 times more STEM graduates than we are. And so part of our initiative has to be about investing into the human capital. If we don't invest into human capital, then we can't develop anything, primarily because we will lack the skills to do so. And so the other half of it is investing into the infrastructure itself, the civil infrastructure. A lot of our roads and bridges are decaying. We need to really think about over the next 20, 30, 40 years, what kind of materials are we going to use to actually build these bridges and roads and other forms of lines of communications. That was a part of the package that went out back in December under the Biden administration to put more money into broadband, put more money into infrastructure, put more money into education. Unfortunately, in the last administration, with the Tangerine Tyrant, he cut a lot of that spending, and that's why you saw things falling apart. And so, in order to get out of this, to answer your question, we need to start sandboxing. Silicon Valley was a sandbox in the late 70s, early 80s for third wave industrialization in terms of semiconductor technologies, in terms of software development. There was a lot of startups that came out of their garages and helped transform society as we see it today. Microsoft, Apple.
Can it be done intentionally, or only with the benefit of hindsight do we see such sandboxes and whirlpools? But can you actually just create one?
Yes, innovation. You can create innovation hubs, and that's one of the ways you can rebuild Black communities. You can rebuild a lot of your Rust Belt. A lot of your steel mills had went out of business over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Same thing with the coal miners. It's more efficient now to produce energy from renewable technologies such as photovoltaics and wind turbines than it is to produce coal. And so coal is no longer a feasible technology to use for energy production. And so what do you do with all those coal miners? Well, they're going to have to skill up. They're going to have to figure out a way, to get back into community college. We're going to have to stop making Pell Grants more widely available. It's a multiplicity of issues that need to be addressed, and it has to be addressed at the government side because only government has the ability to have that lift capability.
But they're not going to do it because Black people. I'm just kidding. Shout out to Uncle Stu, the old man on the block. Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and put the super chat back up there. And thank you to the previous super chatter as well. Says, I agree, move forward or get left behind. Indeed. And speaking of moving forward, okay, and Uncle Stu says some people are stuck. We must move forward. Okay, speaking of moving forward, let's talk a little bit about this Chat GPT thing, okay? Dr. Thunder, you're in the creative space, and this is one of the spaces that everyone is got their eyes trained on with regards to the current iteration of Skynet called Chat GPT, right? The current iteration of our new overlords AI. In the creative space, okay, we're already kind of seeing people speculate as, can't wait for the first symphony to be written by ChatGPT, the first play, perhaps, the first novels type stuff. That's already well within the bounds, right? Given the kind of prose that it produces and given the relative ease of doing that kind of a thing. So in your field, okay, because AI has been a thing that's going to be taking everybody's jobs, that particular trope has been around for a while. But in your field, is there any new innovations, and whom perhaps would benefit? Could there even be benefits back to the industry in the sense of, hey, maybe the first AI written, little Broadway ensemble is going to maybe bring more people to the Broadway show just for the spectacle purposes, right, than before? Whom are you looking at incorporating any of these things into that iPad of yours and whatever else type tech that you're using to get your job done? Or are there investment opportunities either on the distribution side of things or whatever, Chat GPT-3/AI in your industry, sir, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, this is interesting. There's been technology for a long time that's been able to dynamically compose. It will basically it has a library of material that has been cataloged based on which circumstance it can be used, all the variables, and then it will shuffle and make decisions. And since all of the variables are counted for, then it can sound quite, human. You can program in some error if that be necessary, right? But there's stuff that's like this already exists, has for a long time. There's a program called Band in a Box, for instance. Peter Gammons, PG Music, Peter Gammons Music, and this has been out for a long time. At least 20 years, longer than that. And it has the ability to actually improvise in the style of a particular musician. It has the ability to create, like I said, a dynamic rhythm section that is different every time, right? And then, of course, has flexibility that real players wouldn't have because of the ability to speed it up, slow it down, change the style, all kinds of stuff, right? So this stuff has existed for a long time, mostly used for practice tools, and or if I needed to play a gig solo. Matter of fact, I've done this on hundreds of gigs. I've got a group I call Solo Thunder, right? And so I'm basically playing with tracks, but in many cases the tracks are being dynamically created. So there's a newness to the performance. It's not just me playing to something that's canned, it's playing to something that's actually being generated in the moment, right? Though it be computer generated. So so this stuff has existed, and there's composer tools, so composer arranger tools and notation software that operate in the very same way. So say, for instance, I already have the form of this composition, and there's a particular section in the composition where I have already written out the lead line. That is the melody line, the line that's at the top, the one that's going to be mostly perceived based on it being the highest note in the line. And if it knows what the chord changes are, so what the harmonic structure is of the song, I know I'm getting a little jargony, I'm trying to keep it simple, then it can actually generate harmony, generate parts for the rest of whatever the ensemble that you want it to be for that particular section. So if there's like 8 measures, for instance, of something, I already have the melody line written. It can actually, I can do it. It can create 5 more parts, which would be unique parts that when you listen to them together, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and the variables that you have preset. So my point is that this technology, so when people, they talk about this Chat GPT, oh, this is the end of the world and people's jobs are being, I don't know that it's necessarily going to have that impact. I think there are certain jobs that you can do that way, and bots and stuff have been doing customer service for a long time already. So there is that, but yeah, I don't see a risk. And besides the fact that we've had stuff like player pianos for even way before that, we've had player pianos. You go to a saloon, you go to a club and piano is playing by itself. And in the past, it was these big reels of these sheets that has these design. It almost looks like dot matrix or something, paper, but except for there's actual holes. And you load this big thing into the keyboard or into the piano, and it was actually just mechanical. So then you'd have to reload it in another song, or whatever it is. Well, they replaced that with the ability to do that, as technology evolved with the computer. So all of that data was being stored in a computer, but the piano was still mechanical. So it was still a real piano, but it was just, being controlled by the computer. Now you have all digital keyboards, and you've got stuff like MIDI and everything else. So this kind of stuff has been around. It's not going to replace going to see music with artists that you're into, because it's always been about developing a community and less about necessarily the art per se. It's you want the art to be at a certain level. That is a factor, but it's really always been about developing the community. So
I like that you ended there and you continued with the human note that is all through it. One thing that I would mention though is with regards to the fact, the impact that this thing has. It typically impacts, let's say, you're a McDonald's worker, and now all of a sudden there are these automated kiosks, right? And now you got to up level, and it makes it has a deflationary effect on McDonald's. Technology typically is always deflationary in the sense that it makes things, you do less with more, right? That's the general definition of technology, and that makes things cost less, right? Now, some people whom were getting paid for doing X, maybe loading up to play piano, have to now go find something else to do, or flipping, whatever it is that. But it's usually at a particular strata, and there are a lot of people. Hence, you're going to see a shift in the economy, but it's not some kind of thing where every strata is threatened, and perhaps the strata that tends to be threatened to end up being better off. Okay, if they're not complete losers and end up on UBI, then they'll actually find something better, more interesting to do while technology continues with its deflationary effect. Because, by the way, that's what we wanted to do, because technology needs to bail us out of the economic bind that we're in. So well put there when you ended on the human note of the community aspect. Because, look, when you are on, let's say, the lowest end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You're out there just fighting to survive. There are many things that you're not thinking about. One of which is like, fine art, let's say, okay? But then if you solve that problem, you go to the next level, then there's a lot of employment for fine art. And then you go to the next level and the next level. You get to a particular level where you think, oh, I need diversity and inclusion departments. That's also a level 2. You might sneer at it or something, but it's also a level of first world problems, right? The higher up we go, sir, I contend, we're going to find more and more human things that we want.
Can I make a further point? So Kaizo was mentioning, we've got the sort of computer chips and programmers and all like this, but one way that we're sort of lagging is sort of like by advancement with respect to biology. The manipulation of biology and whatever. And this is interesting because when you start thinking about, okay, so I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play a lot of different instruments, but I don't play them at the same time. You understand what I'm saying? I play one instrument at a time. Now, there's a couple things that I could do at the same time, but it's more utilitarian and less about being a freak show, right? It's more like, okay, I want to be able to take all of these different kinds of gigs. In this show that I just did, and I played with 7-time Grammy award-winning composer Maria Schneider. You should check her out. Incredible composer, arranger. Anyhow, so
the white lady.
She is a white lady. That's right. A terrific musician. We did 7 or 8 of her compositions, and that filled up an hour and a half. It's a really intricate, involved stuff at the highest level that you can imagine. And I was playing in the saxophone section, and I played. Let's see here, I was playing bari sax, bass clarinet, alto flute, soprano flute, and clarinet. That was the book. Right now, usually I'll have one or two doubles on one of these particular gigs. So I'll have like 3 instruments that I'm playing, but 5 is not typical. But when they need somebody to be able to do that, I will get the gig, right? Because there's not as many people that can do that. That's part of the sort of utilitarian thing. But even with that, I'm not ever playing 2 instruments at once. I'm just playing a book that has all of these other parts in it that are to be played one at a time.
You're trying to clone yourself, Dr. Thunder? Is that where you're at?
But this is what I was thinking about. There are those like Rashawn Roland Kirk, and there's a couple others, but he's the one that made this famous for playing 2 or 3 instruments at the same time. He'd have 2 saxophones out of his mouth. I don't know if you guys have seen it. You do a search for Rashawn Roland Kirk. Rashawn Roland Kirk, terrific jazz musician. Bright Moments was a tune that he did that was one of the popular songs he did. But anyhow, he would be playing more than 1 instrument at the same time. He was a blind guy. He'd be circular breathing, playing a couple instruments at the same time, sometimes 3 instruments, because he had 2 saxophones, plus he'd be playing a nose flute at the same time. So there's stuff like that. But my point is, with manipulating biology, you have all kinds of potential stuff like, guys with like 6 fingers, hey, let's go see the 6-finger guy play piano, or you have stuff like, perhaps, and this is starting to get, maybe a place that we don't necessarily want to go, but more than 2 arms. Oh, now this guy, he can do this, plus he can do this other thing at the same time, like this, right? So you have like, and I'm not trying to be weird or funny, but the thing is I don't think that would ever be an advantage. I think one person could have a freak show gig, an opportunity in Vegas or something, 1 or 2, but people, they want to know within the same sort of limitations that they have, what is possible. That's what they want to know. They're not interested in if you have extra arms, extra fingers, and if you can do some weird tricks or something. No, they want to know what is possible within, and that's the strength of sports, the Super Bowls today. Mm-hmm. That's the strength of sports. It's not about some mutants that are running around. Maybe half of them are robots, half of them are cyborgs, like this. It's not that. It is, these are human beings. They have frailties like you and I do. What is possible for human beings? Regular, normal, common human beings. So that's why I don't think that kind of stuff ever will take off, would be ever an advantage. The guy that has 6 fingers or something, I don't know that that's ever an advantage.
Not from the commercial. If you're selling an art, no. Right. And by the way, it's interesting that you bring that up, because it's part of some kind of aesthetic theory that I like, which is, if you imagine, for example, you walk into a big church, right? Some basilica somewhere, and you see these tall stones work and everything, very grand structure. You would be pissed if you found out that it was all paper mache, right? That goes to what you're also saying. What is the capacity? What can stone do is what I was here for, not what some fake thing can do, right? That's why we don't like, fake architecture. We want it to be stone. We want the steel to be steel. Otherwise, the grandeur completely is lost. You don't want a fake paper mache plaster cathedral. It loses because it's not real stone. What you want is, wow, so stone can do that. So same thing applies when looking internally in ourselves as well, and judging someone else's performance. Makes perfect sense. Now, Mr. Satya, Google and Microsoft, okay? They both have Indian CEOs, okay? Shout out to the Indians. But he dropped the gauntlet here with regards to Chat GPT, okay? We started out with the military-industrial complex, went into the whole bloated budget and how technology perhaps can take us out of it. Yes, that's the general kind of direction of this thing. And we're ending here with the search wars, if you will. Let's see what.
I mean, look, I have the greatest of admirations for Google and what they've done, and they're an unbelievable company with great talent, and and I have a lot of respect for Sundar and his team. So therefore, I just want us to innovate, right? So there's always, I mean, we compete today. Today was a day where we brought some more competition to search. We've been at it. Believe me, I've been at it for 20 years, and I've been waiting for it. But look, at the end of the day, let's not, they're the 800-pound gorilla on this, which is what they are. And I hope that with our innovation, they will definitely want to come out and show that they can dance. And I want people to know that we made them dance. And I think that'll be a great day.
Yeah, and everybody's saying, ha, 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 he said he'll make them dance. He'll make them dance. Now, I just want to ask a basic question here, starting with Mike V. Who do you want to win the search wars? Is it Bing through the purchase, somewhat purchase, not purchase, give him a few billies of Chat GPT, right? And it's a rather interesting. There's an interesting backstory with that whole thing, by the way, which is they're probably doing something called round tripping, where you pay somebody money, right? You buy a company, but the company is also your biggest client, let's say. So you give them $10 billion, and over the next 2 years, they pay you $10 billion in services, blah, blah, blah. So there's something like that interesting going on with Chat GPT. And that is OpenAI, which is the company, and Microsoft. But just a simple, lighthearted question here, and you may comment on, perhaps, as Dr. Thunder has begun to comment, on the avenues that are open on, shout out to Niger here saying, hey, Black people need to go into tech, right? Technology has always been the place to go into. Technology meaning growth, meaning things that help you do more with less, meaning increasing of efficiency. That's where the lack of obsolescence is, right? Everything else becomes more and more obsolete. The technology is the tip of the spear. But anyways, who do you want to win the search wars, Microsoft or Google, and why? And there's comment in general about this Chat GPT thing, Mike V.
So I don't have a deciding factor on which one I would like to see win. I would like to see the consumer win more than anything else. Variety is where it's going to matter, because it's not going to stop here. Google's going to come out with theirs. They'll polish it up. You'll probably see Oracle come out with something probably in the next 9 months or so. Oracle's a little bit slower to the race. Salesforce will probably have their own thing for their own business hypercloud. I think that's what they call it. You'll start to see everybody. Nintendo will more than likely come up with their own platform as well, because they have such a unique place within the market for gaming and stuff like that. And then you'll start talking about Web3 and metaverse, and it'll start to trickle off and start to expand out. We're just at the beginning right now. We are right now with AI today where Netscape was in 1994 and 1995. And so it took Netscape, maybe roughly 5-7 years before it can mature to be a very viable product, and be more widely accepted throughout the market. But then Microsoft came in with Internet Explorer and kind of blew it out the water, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. So I think you're going to start to see changing of pace or the changing of hands of who's controlling the market and who's really going to benefit the most. Microsoft has some of the greatest, has some of the greatest footprint when it comes to adoption, because everybody, runs Windows. If you have a Intel processor, when it comes to search engine capabilities, Google's a dominant player here. So Google has a vested interest in trying to maintain this. Apple, Apple's going to look to, try to get into the race as well. And so it's too early to determine who's going to win this battle, but I do see the consumer winning as a whole at the end of the day. And in terms of what it's going to do to people's jobs, I think it's a little bit too early to determine that. When it comes to workforce development and developing technologies within the workplace, it's hard to bring in something like Chat GPT without first putting it through what we call a technology review. It has to go through review first. That usually can take 9 to 12, maybe 13, 14 months, and then it has to go through a beta test. That can take another 6 months at best. So you're talking at least a technology cycle, which is usually about 18 to 36 months. That's a long time before you can, in the technology industry, before you can adopt something like that. We're still using Windows 10, even though the consumer is using Windows 11. We don't have any plans to move to Windows 11 until 2024, until it actually, the end of life support starts to creep up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think we're still at the beginning, and I don't think that this is, there's any determining factor at this point.
Gotcha. Now, Kaizo, ChatGPT, one of the things that's coming out here with regards to content creators is, well, the current model right now with regards to search and ad is, you search something, sometimes you can get an answer, right? With is it one box that Google calls it, right? They have the box with the answer in there. But next to that is going to be paid searches and paid ads, or a link to the place where the source of information from. You're still incentivized to click on the link. Now if the model switches to, rather than give you links to click on, or the question will be, why am I incentivized to click on any links if you're just going to give me the answer? You're going to write out the answers. You're going to show me the graphs. You're going to just take the information. You're going to paraphrase it from a number of sources, some of which I don't know. And perhaps there will be no attribution of the sources. And this will affect content creators, right? The people who wrote those blogs or wrote those reviews about what the best restaurant is in Monaco or whatever. And then you get the answer. What are your thoughts there? Should the content creators be, I think actually they already started like lobbying and suing different other AI stuff. Like I think the Getty Photos has a lawsuit going on. But what are your thoughts here? Should the people who produce the data from which AI makes its inferences be compensated? What do you think?
Yeah, so people that produce data should be compensated. However, I think what will more likely happen is that they're going to control the access to the data. So, for example, OpenAI and all these sort of deep dive sort of artificial intelligence, they get information from the websites, right? And not just that, also from the deep web. So, what I think is most likely to happen is that if you're going to present any kind of information in the websites or online, it has to be under some kind of paywall or low JPG resolution so that it doesn't actually archive itself. So what might actually end up happening, there might be a criteria before that allows these sort of Chat GPT or even like, let's say, artificial intelligence services like DALL-E, right? DALL-E 2 for the art generation. What may happen is, okay, so a few rules. First, you can't take an image that is less than this size or resolution, and what that means is obviously is that it can actually protect the artist or the user that's actually creating original content. That's one. Second thing, I believe what's going to happen as well is, okay, if my art is under a paywall, you're not allowed to use it. So what that means is it's not that difficult. People are gonna just generate AIs to be able to detect if this end user product was actually heavily influenced by a specific artist's work. So it is all really, really simple stuff because AI technology is all pixel based logic. So there's already people from certain universities that's already discovered ways to catch ChatGPT cheat styles. For example, a high school student or university student might use ChatGPT to write the essay. People already wrote softwares that can actually detect if the answer or essay was written by ChatGPT or another AI. So all these things, people don't have to worry about it. And as you mentioned earlier, the monetization is going to be based on verification principles. So right now, under beta testing with Bing and ChatGPT, you actually get a source reference because ChatGPT has access to the internet. So what that means is the actual content creator will be paid based on how good their answer is, how verified it is it close to, let's say, research quality standards. So that now you're going to be paying people based on those parameters.
Gotcha. So there's going to be verification of the information that is taken in by the Chat GPT or the AI. Non-verified sources are not going to be included, right? And then there will be a rank ordering of the quality of the information, right? If we're sourcing this information from a very highly regarded journal that publishes scientific papers, well, then
So
yeah,
actually,
give the
now that you
the-
mentioned that, one of the issues because I've used ChatGPT to write a lot of my YouTube videos, actually the one I got decent views from, right? For example, the Bantu expansion, the one on history of Somalia, I used AI to write this stuff. So what I noticed though is when I use it to kind of write who's the richest black man in the world. Okay, at the second richest, I believe it's a Robert guy, right, from America. So what happened is I realized that the information on basic facts was wrong. So I think what will actually happen eventually with all these AI softwares, it will be, okay, the facts, it will have to verify the facts on multiple sources, right? Again, multiple verifiable sources, and then it will have that rank ordering. So instead of kind of writing it all as a professional essay style, X happened at this time, this was this person's name. If it doesn't know, it's probably going to write more of a humanistic term. It is believed that this happened, if that makes sense, by XYZ.
Mhm.
So I think the rank ordering itself will actually portray itself within the way that the AI interfaces with us.
Cool. And also, as time moves forward, because there's always second and third order, basically the way this AI thing works, artificial intelligence, is it retrains itself based on, let's not even go to AI in this particular iteration. Let's talk about Google searches. Google searches have been getting better and better because they have a whole backlog of searches, right? That's how they get better. So as you do more AI searches, AI is going to learn its mistakes. It's going to find out more stuff, and the quality
Yeah,
is
but
just
let's
going to
just be honest. Let's be clear here. It's all right. The machine knows what's better. It's because we have human nodes somewhere in the system that tells it this is better than this.
Yes, that's what the
right?
company. That's why the company exists, right? That's why there's a company called
Yeah.
Google or a company called OpenAI. They're not
Right.
just sitting on their hands. There is a human part to the training of AI models, right? There's a human part of that, the training of both the training and the inference data, whatever. But let me give the shout out to the super chat, which I kind of I addressed in the chat, but I did not say anything about. Thank you very much. Okay, for no, that's Uncle Stu again that I have up. Is it? No, it's not. My bad. I believe it's a Michael. And why China still primarily using coal? This is in response to what Mike V said with regards to the photovoltaic cell. And part of the reason why the coal is more expensive than making that cell is due to the regulations here. And if the regulations are needed, then they don't exist in China. That is, China doesn't have those issues, those regulations, so it can be cheap. But there's something else too with regards to the storage of electrical energy, which we need to make some actual engineering leaps to perfect.
Yeah,
to
battery
make
technology sucks.
Battery technology sucks, and that's something that the coal is there. Okay, the coal is the container for the energy. Okay, the gasoline is the container for the energy. It's in there. You keep it in that corner of your room. It's there. Okay, it's not going anywhere. You take it up tomorrow. You light it up. It'll burn. Fossil fuels are great. We don't use them because they're not great. Okay, they're excellent. Okay, and they're hard to compete against. That density. If you think about how much area you need to collect wind, for example, versus a nice little ball of high grade, high octane stuff that stores itself. So there are actual certain kind of challenges. If it wasn't dirty, if fossil fuel wasn't dirty, okay, it's still a great thing. Anyways, that's
It's only
like
dirty because the white man says it is. We know that crude oil is black.
Well, if I could actually answer his question as well, why is China still primarily using coals? Because they built a lot of facilities in the course of the last 25 to 30 years. Usually the lifespan or the life cycle on an energy facility, no matter what it is usually around that 25 to 30 year mark. Nuclear technology is usually around 27 years. It's usually the deadline that you want to kind of get out of a nuclear facility and kind of decommission it. And so China has a lot of them because they didn't have access to. It was more cost efficient to build a coal facility because North Korea has a lot of coal. They produce a lot of coal, and so it's dirt cheap to bring in on train and load it into a and load it into the facility and fire up the coal-fired plant. In the United States, though, what's different is that the cost of producing energy from a photovoltaic is significantly more cost efficient with photovoltaics now than it is with coal. It's just not sufficient. Labor cost is actually taken into consideration when you're trying to cultivate the coal and move it and transport it and everything else. It's just not efficient at all. We don't use coal here in Massachusetts because we have gas, and that's more efficient, and that's the future for Montesquieu.
That natural gas, and that's what we started this conversation with. It was the Nord Stream pipeline and whatnot. But let me ask you this, MOT, and then we'll wrap up with Dr. Thunder. This was a long episode, a good one. Okay, now MOT, Google, I believe, controls about 28%, or not controls, but of all the ad dollars that are out there, swimming in the internet, Google gets about 28% of that. It used to be about 60% a few years ago, but then other companies such as Facebook and Amazon and so on and so forth are also getting a nice chunk. Okay, 13%, 20%, blah, blah, blah. So why do I say this? I say this as part of a set of facts. The other fact is that there are certain governmental agencies, okay, I think there was a bipartisan bill in 2022 or something like that, that are trying to break up Google, calling it a monopoly. Now, if you go to my previous fact, the reason why it's relevant is a monopoly cannot just control. If it was truly a monopoly, then there would not be all these new innovators such as Amazon and Facebook taking market share from it. Now, Google gets about 80% of its money from ads. It is the ad person, right? But do you think that Google should be broken up? Many people don't like Google and its power. What are your thoughts, if you have any thoughts? If you don't have thoughts, then just general feelings with regards to, is Google a monopoly? Should Google be taken down?
I don't know. I'm not that type of expert on that type of subject, or whether they're too big or whatever. Not. I'm not an actual an expert on that subject. I'm not. I can't answer that question.
Gotcha. But okay, so on Chat GPT type stuff there, this first of all, the flimsy question of, do you have a preference, Bing or Google, to win? And then what are perhaps some of the applications of AI in the transportation industry? The one big one is the self-driving stuff. That's the big AI in that space. When that will come out, who knows, right? But perhaps ways in which you could see something like Chat GPT perhaps in improving your business, some things that you might be able to automate, things you may be able to invest in, applications that are coming down the pike specifically for the transportation industry that I don't know about. So Bing or Google, who you rooting for? And then a comment, if you will, with regards to Chat GPT in the transportation industry.
For Bing and Google, I don't have an actual answer for that, because I think that the actual competition between each other is going to start the biggest game of upmanship in the history of competition. And next thing you know, but actually for the transportation field, right now there are tools that we use based on these analytics to create routes itself, rather than actually waiting on an actual broker to actually create a route for you. Companies who used this type of technology before was TQL, Coyote Logistics. This is like 5 years ago. So they've been using this type of technology to create lanes based on the actual things that are in their database. Like I could say, okay, I need to be here on Monday. I need to be here on, next Monday. They could create a route with millions of loads within their database and automatically assign them to me. So companies as big as that, C.H. Robinson, TQL, Coyote Logistics, they already been doing stuff like that for like 5 years already. But with the Chat GPT stuff, I think that there's going to be so many things coming down to actually check the technology. You'd be a fool to use that stuff, at least for education. But like writing books and all that kind of other stuff, I think it's not going to be as regulated. But trying to use that stuff in the actual position of education, I think, is going to be a problem. And I probably can guarantee you that Biden's speech was wrote with Chat GPT. I can guarantee you that his last speech was in the State of the Union was wrote with Chat GPT. I could guarantee you that, because that's normally not how he talks. It's not normally how you address people. But at the end of the day, they already have speech writers that do stuff like that. So if it's going to be the best place to actually get the best information that's going to be presented toward people, you're still going to need a competent individual with a level of expertise writing wise to give it the correct ideas, to give you the specific output. So it's not going to be a team of people. It's going to be 1 or 2 people. So there's going to be a lot of layoffs in that area. So at the end of the day, you're still not going to be able to get away from skilling up. Whatever current skill set that you currently have, even me, I have to skill up as well. Most of my time is spent reading up on how to do other things other than transportation, because I'm kind of transitioning off into, service trucks rather than being on the road. And that is a whole nother group of things that I have to do. So the layoffs have already happened within the transportation industry already. Most of these people aren't even required to show up to buildings anymore. A lot of these people are required to work from home. They never really came back to these big ass buildings that they were paying a lot of money to. Like most of the brokers that I have to contact for like off-brand loads, they all work from home. Most of these people before the pandemic was working in office. Now all of these people 100% of the time is working from home. You get a lot of work done for providing somebody an actual 40-hour work week with like 200 hours of coverage. They may not be working all the time, but you still got the awareness that amount of time that they're actually logged into your actual product is still quote unquote working. Like before the actual pandemic, I could barely get somebody on the phone after 5 o'clock. After the pandemic, dude, I get people 24 hours a day. Even if I leave a message at 9 o'clock, I get a call back at like 9:30. So actually providing people better levels of service with lower pay, which is what they're actually doing, is what's actually going on within this career field. And people who think that, oh, well, they're going to be doing all this stuff with automated trucks. Somebody listen, the only reason why that we're on e-logs is for us to give all of the data and information over to Elon Musk and other transportation companies. That's why we went on e-logs in the first place. It had nothing to do with anything else except for providing free data to entrepreneurs and actual companies who want to actually automate this actual industry. So now they have a problem with not enough data to too much data, and they don't know what to do with it. So the only thing they can do is go toward the actual areas to which they can actually run trucks, and it's just not going to be able to work as well as people think it is. This industry is going to be around forever because they're never going to update the roads. You can barely get asphalt on the actual road across the United States. How are you going to be able to get things to move electronically or automatically around that? 1 degree of wind direction, temperature, everything you have on the road comes to a stop. A lot of this stuff is still being done by hand. Like I said, a lot of people are looking for technology as an excuse not to get in actual businesses that they should be getting into when they should be doing the opposite. There are opportunities everywhere. There will continue to be opportunities everywhere. The people who do not want to actually scale up will never scale up. And the people who are actually just remotely connected to the productivity piece will be doing far better than their parents and within a couple of months. I like that.
Excellently well put there. And Dr. Thunder mentioned earlier, and then I talked about the strata of people. That thing that, perhaps, you were told when you were in school about, well, don't just go through the motions. Learn the stuff. If you're studying sciences, they tell you, don't be a technician. Okay. Be an actual engineer. Know the crap, because technician is a paper pusher. Is a data entry person. Knows how to program Excel, but doesn't know what's behind it. The people who know what's behind stuff are still going to have jobs, right? The 1 or 2 people as opposed to a team of people that you refer to, MOT, are the people who understand the concepts behind things and can direct Chat GPT on where to go, know when it's not going the right direction, and all these kinds of things. We see all this kind of stuff every day in engineering, okay, where you have that employee that understands what's going on, and you can kind of rely on them on something, and they can do all kinds of things, and there's no way that their job is in jeopardy. And you have the other person whom you're like, I could replace this person with a nice set of Excel spreadsheets written by somebody from Brazil that I can pay pennies on the dollar, and and a nice little system. Anyways, Dr. Thunder,
Correct.
you're gonna
Wait, hold on. One more thing. Being a competent employee, that's a Swiss Army knife, is coming back. You're not going to need all these incompetent supervisors and a whole bunch of incompetent staff. That's what data and technology is going to be able to do. It's going to be able to detect the inefficiencies within organizations and point those people out. That's the great thing about this technology. It's going to be leveraging the more productive people within the environment at the expense of people who don't bring anything to the environment. I like the way this thing is going. Power to the producers. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for stopping by, sir. Now, Dr. Thunder, you're going to take us out, and you're going to answer the first question that you didn't get the chance to answer, which is, do you think that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline? Okay, Nord Stream 2. Not just Nord Stream 2, but basically the pipeline coming from Russia to Germany, blown up 2022 around September, and everybody blamed Putin, and it doesn't seem to make sense for them to do it. It seems like the other side, either Russia, NATO, EU, it will make more sense for them to do it. Do you think the United States was that reckless? Do you think that we blew up the pipeline? And then give your final thoughts as to this whole conversation. And this whole conversation started from that pipeline, went into the State of the Union speech with the economy and the debt ceiling and all that kind of stuff being a major issue. And we're now hoping that technology takes us out. That's what we ended. But did US blow up the pipeline, Dr. Thunder?
Probably. Probably. I'm not going to pretend I know, I have any inside info on this, but probably. I know the same stuff everybody else knows. As far as this, I just basically from my end comments, I wanted to say a couple things. One thing was the Chat GPT thing is interesting. Very actually useful for YouTubers. And this is something that one of the usual searches that people make on YouTube is top 10 of this, what are the 5 best that, and I would argue that at least in recent months, maybe the last year, a disproportionate percentage of those were Chat GPT scripts. And they get a lot of views. They get a lot of views because they're topics. If you can find topics, if you get online, you can find some pretty interesting tutorials, ways to write a script with Chat GPT, and it'll go all the way from beginning to end as far as creating a video. They'll tell you, okay, do this search term, get on Google, do this search term, and so you can figure out what the trending this is, then the trending that is, okay, and then there's this other search you go to, and it'll tell you who hasn't, which hashtags are the top hashtags, and they'll show you how to go in just underneath what the top is, or to try to find the least searched term and create a video on that, and all this kind of stuff. There's all this stuff, and you can ask Chat GPT to give you a top 10. Give me 5 dog breeds that are great for first-time pet owners. All kinds of stuff like that. And those videos get an incredible amount of views. They get an incredible amount of views, and you never have to show your face. Okay? So, now you do the voiceover. You wouldn't necessarily have a robot reading it. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of these that there's a robot reading it because they've got a lot of really good readers now. So, it's a new day. There's a lot of different opportunities. And then the last thing I wanted to say was sort of piggybacking off of something that MOT said, which is about, some people are going to level up and some people are not. Skill up actually is what the term he used. Some are going to do it and some are not. Okay. The ones that won't, they're going to have a hard way to go. The ones that have always kind of been willing to skill up, they're going to be fine. Now, in academia, this whole pandemic, it exposed is not the right term. It revealed the rather, okay, so you have a lot of professors that have been in the academic bubble for 30 years, 40 years like this. So what it is that they do is not necessarily up to date technology based, or not technology wise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So something that happened during the pandemic was when a lot of these programs had to move from doing classroom in person content to now doing completely virtual stuff, using Zoom and using other platforms and other ways to teach the information. They had to totally learn how to do something different. And there was a number of them that just said, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm retiring, because it was too much of a learning curve. I would argue that we're in a place now, and moving forward, we're in a place where if you're not one of the people that is constantly learning the newest stuff, you're going to be in serious trouble. You're going to be in serious trouble. One thing that happened in academia was there used to be a whole lot more administrative assistant, secretarial types.
Mm-hmm.
All of those positions, almost all of them, not all of them, you still have some, have been replaced by laptop computers. So now what it is this the expectation that the faculty member do their own secretarial stuff because of computers, right? So that's a rudimentary example of what it is that I'm saying. I'm saying take that, put that on steroids. That's what's happening. And so if you're not willing or able to stay up to date on that, it's not just going to be, can you teach the material? It's going to be, can you teach the material and also stay up to date on all the technological advancements, such that within the life of your position, the significant changes that are going to take place in the way as far as teaching the material, all of that, dude, it's going to be, if you can imagine somebody, a first year professor this year, say they're going to be in their job for 40 years, they're going to be in their job for 40 years. Can you imagine how much different the job is going to be in 40 years from now? And if that person is the type that says, you know what, I'm not going to learn anything new, I'm just going to teach the stuff that I've been teaching, I'm not going to pick up any new skills, you're going to be in serious trouble. This is happening everywhere. So I think that skill up point is a very important point. We must skill up. We must be willing to skill up. And I like something he said. He said most of his time is spent actually studying, reading stuff, trying to figure out what's the new, what's the next thing, what do I need to learn next? That's what all of us need to be doing. So.
Very well put indeed, sir. That's what all of us need to be doing. As a matter of fact, I often think sometimes, like, even with maybe some more frivolous and flimsy things like, culture, like popular music of what the kids are into, I always want to have a slight one finger on the pulse of that over there, because you never quite know, right? I don't want to be completely dead in any particular area, right? As long as it's not crap, right? But you want to like, what exactly are the kids like? What are the kids watching, and what's the music that they're listening to?
Yeah. The problem is what if that music isn't crap though? That's a different discussion though.
Indeed. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, another episode in the bag. 4 p.m. Central. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Every Sunday. Place to be. Highest level conversations on the most relevant topics. And you just witnessed another episode in the can. Shout out to the people who super chatted. We had the poll where most people think, yes, U.S. did it. Over 60%, with 37% thinking that Russia did it in terms of the Nord Stream pipeline. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what's a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.